Chapter 24. This chapter is long. I would recommend breaking it up a little bit as you read, or just putting aside a lot of time. Also, just, keeping these annotations open, zooming in, kind of following along as I go will also help you. So we're back to the present time. So just remember that the 3 chapters prior were inner reflections narrated by Denver, Beloved, and Setha about their realization, about who Beloved is, and the fact that they're all reunited as a family. Now we're back in the present time with Paul D at the church. So you will see that we begin with a description of the church and just what it's like on the inside. Nothing really tells us that this is where Paul D is staying until we get down here where it says Paul D sat on the porch steps and got additional warmth from a bottle of liquor. But we know he's at the church just from earlier chapters that this is where he's been living. So we have to infer that's what we're reading about at this point. He's keeping his hands tucked kind of between his knees and gripping his wrists. His tobacco tin is blown open, spilled contents that floated freely and made him their play and prey. So remember, he refers to his heart as a tobacco tin. This is the idea that, the trauma he's experienced has made him shut himself up and alienate himself from his feelings and from the world that could, release those feelings. And remember that when he first saw Setha again, his tobacco tin heart broke open because he was reunited with a dear friend and they share the same trauma. So now he's trying to deal with all these feelings, these spilled contents of his heart. He thinks about just his past. And so we're going to get now a couple different significant flashbacks to where Paul D came from. This is his story. He was the youngest of 3 half-brothers, all had the same mother but different fathers. They were sold to Garner and kept there, forbidden to leave the farm for 20 years. He does remember that once he was in Maryland, he met 4 families of slaves who had all been together for 100 years. Great-grandparents, mothers, fathers, cousins, uncles, and he's jealous. He remembers being jealous. He watched them with awe and envy, and each time he discovered large families of Black people, he made them identify over and over who each was, what relation, who in fact belonged to who, because he didn't have that experience, and so he misses it, as anybody would. So we have just a sort of memories of those conversations. Nothing like that had ever been his, and growing up at Sweet Home, he didn't miss it, because at Sweet Home, they were kind of like a family. He had his brothers, 2 friends, baby Suggs in the kitchen, a boss who showed them how to shoot and listened to what they had to say. So he's being treated decently by Mr. Garner. He doesn't miss the fact that he's not part of a big family. A mistress who made their soap and never raised her voice. For 20 years, they had all lived in that cradle until baby left. Setha came and Hallie took her. He made a family with her, Hallie, and Sixo was hell-bent to make one with a 30-mile woman. Remember, that's the woman he goes to visit by walking all the way, seeing her for 2 hours, and then walking all the way back so he's not missed in the fields the next day. Paul D waved goodbye to his oldest brother. The boss was dead, the mistress nervous, and the cradle already split. Sixo said the doctor made Mrs. Garner sick. Okay, so this is a new detail. I put a question mark by this. So just remember, Mr. Garner dies, Mrs. Garner's left alone, and we know that just from the end of sort of the time that Setha spent with her, that she was in bed, she had a big growth on her neck. Never have we heard this before, though. Said he was giving her to drink what stallions got when they broke a leg and no gunpowder could be spared, and had it not been for Schoolteacher's new rules, he would have told her so. So they're treating her with medicine that you give horses. So either because they're ignorant or because they don't have access to medicine or they don't want doctors to know that Mrs. Garner is sick. I don't know. This is definitely a mystery here. This is the first time we've encountered this detail. It's just worth noting. Sixo had a knowing tale about everything, including Mr. Garner's stroke, which he said was a shot in his ear put there by a jealous neighbor. So Sixo is telling stories about what's happening with the Garners. I don't know if Sixo is reliable or not. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Because, where's the blood? If Mr. Garner was shot in the ear, wouldn't there be some evidence? There was no blood. Mr. Garner came home, bent over his mare's neck, sweating and blue-white. Not a drop of blood. Sixo grunted, the only one of them not sorry to see him go. Later, however, he was mighty sorry. They all were, because then Schoolteacher came. So this section here explains why Schoolteacher had to come, and that's because Mrs. Garner felt that she needed somebody who could figure, meaning who could take care of the books, who understood money and accounting. Also, Mrs. Garner, which we have already read, was worried about being a woman by herself on the plantation with all the slaves, that there should be a man there. But mostly it's because she wanted somebody who could take care of the finances. Plus, she needs another white on the place, but it's the other reason here, especially if it's a man. So that's the way it was. Nobody counted on Garner dying. Nobody thought he would. How about that? Everything rested on Garner being alive. Without his life, each of theirs fell to pieces. Now, ain't that slavery, or what is it? At the peak of his strength, taller than tall men and stronger than most, they clipped him, Paul D. First his shotgun, then his thoughts, for Schoolteacher didn't take advice from Negroes. The information they offered he called backtalk, and developed a variety of corrections, which he recorded in his notebook, to re-educate them. He complained they ate too much, rested too much, talked too much, which was certainly true compared to him, because Schoolteacher ate little, spoke less, and rested not at all. Once he saw them playing a pitching game, and his look of deeply felt hurt was enough to make Paul D blank. So this is something we've talked about before. It's this universal question that's going to be dealt with a lot in this chapter, which is, what is a man? What is a woman? It's not even a gendered question. What is a human? What makes a human? Who gets to say what is a human? In this situation, we get the sense that Mr. Garner was able to say Paul D was a man, and Schoolteacher was able to take that away. So it goes on and on. This whole what is a man, what is a human question, it continues through this entire next page. For years, Paul D believed Schoolteacher broke into children what Garner had raised into men. So immediately, Schoolteacher reverses their sense of self. Garner called and announced them men, but only on Sweet Home and by his leave, like by his permission. Was he naming what he saw or creating what he did not? This is also a very interesting question. I feel like these questions apply to some aspects of society today for all of us. You know, who decides our value? Do we, or does somebody else? That was the wonder of Sixo and even Hallie. It was always clear to Paul D that those two were men, whether Garner said so or not. So that's Paul D's opinion. It troubled him that concerning his own manhood, he could not satisfy himself on that point. So Paul D sees that the other slaves are men, but he is not so sure that he is. He did many manly things, Paul D acknowledges, but was that Garner's gift or his own will? What would he have been anyway before Sweet Home without Garner? In Sixo's country, or his mother's, or God help him on the boat, did a white man saying it make it so? Suppose Garner woke up one morning and changed his mind, took the word away. Would they have run then? So he starts to think that they have been isolated in a wonderful lie, protected and convinced that they were special. And when he does finally get free, which remember that happens when he's part of the chain gang and they're sleeping in the boxes and the boxes flood and they get out. He's heading towards Alfred, Georgia. And for the first time, he starts to see the world as a free person, to sort of love what is around him. He remembers being in love with the look of the world, and his love was a tree, but not a big tree like brother, a small tree. So this is sort of a metaphor for like he's developing love. He doesn't really know what love is, but he's starting to consider it and recognize it. Then he says he remembers song murder and the aspen. I put a question mark here, but we're going to get clarification on this again. We have read about this before, about how Sixo died. We'll see this again in a little bit. And then he remembers finally coming to 124 and seeing Setha and how he felt, how she moved him from room to room like a rag doll, that he felt for the first time a bigger love when he came back to her. So now we're back to the present time again, sitting on the porch of a dry goods church, a little drunk with nothing much to do. He could have these thoughts, like what if thoughts that cut deep but struck nothing solid. He held his wrists. Passing by that woman's life, getting in it and letting it get in him had set him up for this fall. Wanting to live out his life with a whole woman was new, and losing the feeling of it made him want to cry and think deep thoughts that struck nothing solid. It's a beautiful description of heartbreak. Now he wondered what went wrong. And starting with the plan, everything had. So the plan, with a capital P, was the plan to escape. So he's going to now go back and do a much deeper flashback on what exactly was that plan. Now, we know a good chunk of it, but there's more that we're going to find out here. So it was actually initiated by the 30-year-old woman, the 30-mile woman. This is the woman that Sixo used to go visit. She's the one that told him that there were going to be seven Negroes on her place who would be joining two others and heading north. The two others had done it before and knew the way. That one of the two, a woman, would wait for them in the corn when it was high. So this means like in the late summer, early fall, when the corn is tall, that's when they're going to escape. One night and a half of the next day, she would wait. And if they came, she would take them to the caravan where others would be hidden. So that's more slaves going in a bigger group. She would rattle, and that would be the sign. So she would make a sound to indicate that she was there. And when they heard that sound, they had to go to her. So that was the plan. And then he goes into more details here to leave in the dark in order to get a good start. They talk about, when should we go exactly? Like, how are we going to get out? What should we bring? Setha needs blankets so that she can tie the baby to her back, and they need maybe a pot or something to cook in, and they need maybe some weapons like a knife or something. Setha says she'll bring some syrup or molasses, some bread. Like they sort of talk about what they could bring. They bury a rope. So they're just trying to think of what could they bring that wouldn't take up too much room. They watch and memorize the comings and goings of the school teacher and his pupils. They think about Mrs. Garner and what her needs are at night, because frequently Setha has to go to her at night. One day a week, they skip breakfast completely and travel 10 miles to church, expecting a large dinner upon their return. This makes me think they're trying to sort of get used to traveling on foot without having eaten. So it's just an interesting way of preparing. But then we have a lot of repetition. But. These are all the things that kind of started to go wrong before the plan. So Setha gets pregnant, and then by August, she's really heavy with child. Neighbors discouraged by Garner when he was alive now feel free to visit Sweet Home. So there's more people coming and going because Schoolteacher's there, and he lets more people come visit. There's a change where Setha's children can't play in the kitchen anymore. So she has to run back and forth between the house and where the slave quarters are to look after her children. Beloved baby girl is 9 months old. So there's just like a lot of moving pieces all of a sudden. 9-month-old baby is potentially loud and restless. Like, how do you move around and escape with a child of that age? But after the conversation about the shoat, remember this was the young pig that Sixo had stolen to eat, Sixo is tied up with the stock at night, like with the animals. And locks are put on bins, pens, sheds, and coops. So like Schoolteacher is locking up all the food for the animals so that the slaves don't take it. Sixo keeps a nail in his mouth so that he can undo the rope when he has to in the middle of the night. I mean, I'm just trying to imagine, how do you cut through a rope with a knife, with a nail in your mouth? It just sounds incredibly impossible. Hallie is told to work his extra time on Sweet Home, not at another plantation. So these are all the changes that Schoolteacher makes between the beginning of the plan and when they're actually going to try to escape, that is making the plan much more difficult. They still think it's a good plan. It can be done right under the watchful pupils and their teacher, so they do feel hope that it's going to work, but they had to make some changes. First, they had to change the leaving. They memorized the directions that Hal gave them, Sixo needing time to untie himself, break open the door, and not disturb the horses. He's going to leave later and join them later with the 30-mile woman. All four will go straight to the corn. Hallie, who also needs more time now because of Setha, decides to bring her and the children at night, not wait until the first light. They will go straight to the corn and not assemble at the creek. So there's more just like get to the corn, don't meet up at the creek first. The corn stretches to their shoulders. It will never be higher, so they know it's about time. And then one mid-morning they hear it, or Hallie does, and he begins to sing it to the others. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. What shall I do? On his dinner break, he leaves the field. He has to tell Setha that he heard the sign. For 2 successive nights, she has been with Mrs. Garner, and he can't chance it that she will not know that this night she cannot be. She has to leave that night. Paul sees him go from underneath Brother's shade. This is the big plantation tree where they are chewing corn cake. They see Hallie swinging along, and they're just like licking their lips and enjoying their food. Then we have a bunch of like just mysterious happenings. Some of this we've already read before. Nobody knows what happened except for the churn. Remember, Hallie was seen by Paul D kind of having lost his mind and smearing butter all over his face. That was the last anyone ever saw of Hallie. What Paul D knew was that Hallie disappeared and never told Setha anything. So Setha didn't get the message and was next seen squatting in butter. Maybe when he got to the gate and asked to see Setha, the Schoolteacher heard a tint of anxiety in his voice, the tint that would make him pick up his ever-ready shotgun. I mean, we don't know this is true. This is speculation. Maybe Hallie made the mistake of saying my wife in some way that would put a light in Schoolteacher's eyes. Setha says now that she heard shots, but did not look out the window of Mrs. Garner's bedroom. But Hallie was not killed or wounded that day because Paul D saw him later with the butter all over his face. So like there's a lot of things that happened that nobody knows. So anything could have happened. Maybe Hallie got in the barn, hid there, and got locked in with the rest of Schoolteacher's stock. Anything. He disappeared and everybody was on his own. So they all have to get themselves to the corn somehow. So that's what's sort of shared here is like, who's there? Did you see Paul? Did you see Hallie? Did you see Setha? Like, where is everybody? Nobody knows. Sixo turns then to the woman and they clutch each other. So Sixo and the 30-mile woman are at the meeting place. She is lit now with some glowing, some shining that comes from inside her. So I think about this. We're going to find out later. This is actually referring to the fact that she's probably pregnant. But certainly love for each other is going on here too. Before, when she knelt on creek pebbles with Paul D, she was nothing, a shape in the dark, breathing lightly. But with Sixo, she's lit up and she's very much present with all of them. Sixo is about to crawl out to look for the knives he buried. He hears something. Then he hears nothing. Then they decide to forget the knives. And then the 3 of them climb up the bank, and Schoolteacher, his pupils, and 4 other white men move toward them. So they've been caught. Schoolteacher has found them. With lamps, Sixo pushes the 30-mile woman and she runs further on in the creek bed. Paul D and Sixo run the other way towards the woods. Both are surrounded and tied. So Paul D and Sixo are caught. 30-mile woman is not. Okay. The air gets sweet then, and this is an interesting contrast. There's honeybee smell. Paul D is tied like a mule. He feels how dewy and inviting the grass is. He is thinking about that and where Paul A might be when Sixo turns and grabs the mouth of the nearest pointing rifle. He begins to sing. 2 others shove Paul D and tie him to a tree. Schoolteacher is saying, "Alive, I want him alive." Sixo swings and cracks the ribs of one. So he's like holding onto a rifle and he swings it at one of the white men, but with bound hands cannot get the weapon in position to use it in any other way. All the white men have to do is wait for his song, perhaps to end. 5 guns are trained on him while they listen. So he's singing. Sixo is singing. So remember I said like the murder song? This is what's happening. Sixo is singing. He's being defiant as he's tied up there by the white men. Finally, one of the white men hits Sixo in the head, and there's a fire burning in front of him. And then Schoolteacher changes his mind that Sixo isn't worth keeping. This one will never be suitable. By the light of the hominy fire, Sixo straightens. He is through with his song. He laughs. A rippling sound like Seth's sons make when they tumble in hay. His feet are cooking. The cloth of his trousers smokes. He laughs. And then he starts calling out 70, 70, and they shoot him. So he doesn't burn. He is shot by Schoolteacher or one of the other white men because he's annoying. So this is the murder song, tied up to a tree. So again, that's a reference to before. So Paul D is shackled. And he seems to be saved, at least for now. As soon as the white men get to where they have tied their horses and mount them, they are calmer, talking among themselves. They talk about the problems they face. They've lost some slaves. Schoolteacher is lamenting like the cost of the slaves. This is the first time that Paul D actually hears what his value is. Schoolteacher says he would have to trade this here one, meaning Paul D, for $900 if he could get it. This could be a quiz question for sure. And set out to secure the breeding one, this would be Setha, her foal, and the other one, if he found him. With the money from this one here, meaning Paul D, he could get 2 young ones, 12 or 15-year-old, and maybe with the breeding one, her 3 pickaninnies and whatever the foal might be, the baby she's carrying, he and his nephews would have 7, and Sweet Home would be worth the trouble. So he's talking about them like they're animals. So just remember how he thought he was studying the slaves a while back and making notes in his notebook and trying to figure out how human they were. In this situation, he's talking about them like livestock. Look to you like Lillian gonna make it? This is the first time, I think, in a long time we've heard Mrs. Garner's first name. Touch and go. So she's still alive, but she's not going to be alive for long, most likely. You was married to her sister-in-law, wasn't you? So he says, yes, I was. Was she frail too? A bit. A fever took her. So Schoolteacher is also a widow. These women have died. Well, you don't need to stay no widower in these parts. He's like, you could find a woman. You own a plantation. And he says, my cogitation right now is Sweet Home. Like, I'm married to this plantation. My life commitment is to the plantation. And that's some spread. So he's talking to his friends, So they put a 3-spoke collar on Paul D so he can't lie down, and they chain his ankles together. Then Schoolteacher looks at Paul D for a long time before he closes the door of the cabin. So Paul D is like in a cabin. He thinks he could have sung something. He's thinking about Sixo's tune, but the words put him off. He didn't understand the words. although it shouldn't have mattered because he understood the sound. Hatred so loose it was Juba. So he remembers Sixo singing was like sarcastic, and it was showing hate and disrespect towards the whites. A warm sprinkle comes and goes. He thinks he hears sobbing. This seems to come from Mrs. Garner's window, but it could be anything, anyone, even as she cat making a yearning known. So this could, there could be sounds that he's hearing that are actual animals outside in the wild, but it sounds like maybe it's Mrs. Garner crying. He lets his chin rest on the collar and speculates on how he can hobble over to the grate, boil a little water, and throw in a handful of meal. So he's trying to figure out how to make something to eat, despite the fact that he has a collar on, like a metal collar, and he's shackled at his hands and feet. That's what he is doing when Setha comes in, rain wet and big belly, saying she's going to cut. So she's going to run off, even though she's so pregnant, and she has no idea where anybody has gone. She can't find Hallie. She doesn't know who was caught. So she's asking Paul D, did Sixo get away? And he says, no, Sixo is dead. The 30-mile woman ran. He doesn't know what happened to Paul A or Hallie, but he's assuming that, probably Paul A is dead, just because it seems like a reasonable expectation, but he doesn't know for sure. And she's like, did you see Sixo die? And he says, yes, for sure. That he knows for sure. So as he watches Setha, he realizes that he's not going to see her again. He's anticipating that if she goes and runs and tries to escape, that she will die. Or if she actually gets away, that she'll be gone to him, that he'll never see her. And he knows he will never see her again. And right then and there, his heart stopped. So this is the moment when his tin can heart was formed, where he locked up his feelings because the idea of saying goodbye to her is too much for him to bear. The pupils must have taken her to the barn for sport right afterwards. And when she told Mrs. Garner, they took down the cowhide. So after he saw her, then that's what happened right after was those nephews of school teachers, or those pupils of school teachers, took her milk. And then when she told Mrs. Garner, school teacher whipped her. And despite the fact that she has been whipped so badly and that she's so pregnant, she still left. That kind of blows his mind. He realizes that her price was greater than his, property that reproduced itself without cost. So he's even measuring his worth against hers. So again, that question, what is a man? Is it the price I'm worth, like what they paid for me? Of course not. But he starts to think about everybody at Sweet Home. Like, was somebody worth $20 more than him? Was he worth more than somebody else? That's what all of this is about here. And he heard real sorrow in his voice when he pronounced Sixo unsuitable. Who would be fooled into buying a singing black man with a gun, shouting 7070 because his 30-mile woman got away with his blossoming seed? This is our hint that she's pregnant. What a laugh, so rippling and full of glee it put out the fire. And it was Sixo's laughter that was on his mind, not the bit in his mouth when they hitched him to the buckboard. Then he saw Hallie with the rooster, smiling as if to say, you ain't seen nothing yet. How could a rooster know about Alfred, Georgia? So this is when he left for that chain gang and had to be in that work crew. So a lot of important details here, backstory about the escape, some more information about Paul D's tin can heart, but several times this question, what makes a human? Who decides your worth? This is something I can imagine a class discussing for 30 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of ways that we can apply this question to many aspects of life today. Obviously, this book is a lot about the legacy of slavery. This is certainly one of the legacies of slavery that is part of all society.